There are words that, while seemingly simple, carry an impact capable of shaping the course of a relationship. Sometimes they come as casual comments, other times as direct statements, but their effect is the same. They erode your peace, your self-esteem, and even your sense of direction within the relationship. If you've ever felt unsettled, confused, or found yourself questioning whether you're in the right place because of certain words, this video is for you. Today we're breaking down 5 things she might say that you should take as a clear sign to stop and protect yourself. These aren't random phrases. They are warnings of dynamics that can trap you in draining relationships if you don't learn to recognize them in time. My intention isn't to instill distrust, but to help you open your eyes, read between the lines, and make wise decisions for your emotional well-being. I'm Celia. Stay with me until the end, because what you'll learn here won't just bring clarity, it will also give you the tools to act with confidence and respect for yourself. Let's get started. Number 1. If she says she doesn't need anyone. There's something undeniably alluring about the idea of independence. That apparent strength of someone who claims they don't need anyone, who's perfectly fine on their own, can even inspire admiration at first. But be careful. Behind those words, there might be something far more complex and potentially harmful for you. When a woman tells you she doesn't need anyone, she's not just expressing healthy autonomy. What she may be revealing is a rejection of vulnerability, a resistance to sharing her deepest emotions, or even an unwillingness to rely on someone emotionally. While it may sound like strength, it's often a wall she's built to protect herself from past wounds. But that wall doesn't just isolate her, it also keeps you on the outside. Being in a relationship with someone who insists they don't need you puts you in an emotionally unbalanced position. On one hand, you feel the urge to prove that you're there for her, that she can count on you. But on the other, she clings to that barrier, denying you the space needed to build a genuine connection. And that doesn't just frustrate you, it drains you. A healthy relationship isn't built on absolute self-sufficiency. As Aristotle said, humans are social animals. We're not meant to live in isolation. Even Stoicism, which we admire for its emphasis on emotional autonomy, teaches us that connection with others is essential for a fulfilling life. No one needs to be rescued, but we all need to feel understood, supported, and valued. If she says she doesn't need anyone, it might be her way of protecting herself. But you have to ask yourself, how long can you stay in a relationship with someone who refuses to share their world with you? That barrier isn't something you can break, no matter how hard you try. Only she can choose to lower it. And if she's not willing, the wisest thing you can do is walk away before you get stuck in a relationship where you're always the one giving more. Now, when a relationship wears you down emotionally, it's not just because of a lack of reciprocity, it's because the dynamic starts to become unfair. This brings us to another type of behavior that, if you don't catch early, can turn into a heavy emotional burden. Let's talk about what happens when she refuses to take responsibility and turns every problem into a direct accusation against you. Number 2, if she always blames you and never reflects. Relationships are full of wonderful moments, but also tension. That's natural. When two worlds collide, friction happens. However, what sets a healthy relationship apart from a toxic one isn't the absence of conflict, but the ability of both people to own their part in it. This brings us to a red flag you can't ignore. If she constantly blames you and never reflects on her own role in the problems, it's time to pause and take a closer look. Let me share something I learned from a dear friend, Stella. She used to say, "Arguments are like mirrors. They reflect both you and the other person at the same time." She was right, but that's not always the case. I've seen situations, and maybe this sounds familiar to you, where the mirror only seems to point at you, as if all the relationship's problems were solely your fault. No matter how hard you try or what you do, you're always the one who messes things up or doesn't do enough. When someone can't, or worse, won't reflect on their own mistakes, they're essentially saying they're not ready for an equal partnership. A relationship isn't a stage where one person points fingers and the other takes the blame. It's a dance where both must accept their missteps and work together to find a rhythm that works. The danger of being with someone who always blames you is that over time, it chips away at your self-esteem. You start to doubt yourself even when you shouldn't. You feel like every conflict is your fault, and you end up walking on eggshells, afraid to trigger a negative reaction. The lesson here, my friend, is clear. No one should have to carry that burden. I remember Charles, a man I met at a relationship workshop. He told me how, for years, he lived with a partner who, whenever something went wrong, would say, "You always ruin everything." That simple phrase became a dagger that paralyzed him. Every time he tried to share his perspective or bring up something that bothered him, she shut him down with a direct attack, shifting the conversation to everything she claimed he was doing wrong. Charles reached a point where he believed he was incapable of having a healthy relationship. But one day, during a trivial argument, he realized something powerful. He had been apologizing for things that weren't even his responsibility for years. When your partner refuses to reflect on their actions, it doesn't just create an imbalance in the relationship, it can deeply affect you emotionally. And the most dangerous part is that if you don't recognize it in time, you might start to accept this pattern as normal. But it's not. A mature relationship requires both people to look in the mirror, even when it's uncomfortable, and acknowledge their mistakes. The Stoics had a fundamental principle: know yourself. It's a constant reminder that change and growth begin with self-awareness. But when you're with someone who refuses to look inward and only seeks blame outward, you end up carrying a burden that's not yours to bear. If you find yourself in a relationship like this, ask yourself, how much longer are you willing to live under the weight of constant accusations? Because I promise you, life feels much lighter when you walk beside someone who knows how to take responsibility. And speaking of imbalances in relationships, there's another warning sign that may seem subtle at first, but becomes just as draining over time, when she minimizes your dreams or achievements. Let's dive into why this behavior is so harmful and how to spot it before it takes a toll on you. Number 3, if she dismisses your dreams or achievements. Imagine this. You excitedly share a project you've been working on for months. It might not be groundbreaking to the world, but it's meaningful to you. It could be a small success at work, an idea you've been nurturing, or even a hobby that brings you joy. Now imagine that instead of receiving support, she responds with a cold, almost dismissive comment. "That's not such a big deal," or "I don't see why you waste your time on stuff like that." Those words, though they may seem insignificant, carry a devastating impact. When someone dismisses your dreams or achievements, they're not just criticizing what you do, they're invalidating who you are. Your projects, passions, and victories, whether big or small, are extensions of yourself. When they don't receive the respect they deserve, the foundation of the relationship starts to crack. This behavior reflects something deeper, an emotional disconnect that can be dangerous. Someone who truly loves you doesn't need to understand every detail of your goals. They simply support them because they understand what they mean to you. The real problem isn't her lack of enthusiasm, it's the way she discredits and diminishes your efforts. And that, my friend, is a sign that the relationship isn't a space where you can thrive. Plato once said that the soul has 3 parts: reason, spirit, and desire. Your dreams are born from this combination. They represent what you want to become and what fuels you in life. When someone doesn't respect your achievements or aspirations, they are, consciously or not, extinguishing that spirit. If you allow it, you might start doubting yourself, questioning whether what you do truly matters. But let me make something clear. Your dreams and achievements don't need validation from anyone but you. It doesn't matter if they seem small or insignificant to others. They are yours, and that makes them valuable. However, when you share your life with someone, you expect that person to be a source of encouragement, a partner who motivates and supports you. If instead, you're met with indifference or disdain, the relationship becomes a roadblock to your personal growth. Maybe this sounds familiar. Every time you try to talk about your goals or what excites you, she shifts the conversation to her own interests, or worse, dismisses them as trivial. It's a pattern that, if unnoticed, can lead you to stop sharing what makes you happy. Over time, that disconnect will quietly erode the relationship from within. Remember, a partner isn't there to make you smaller, but to walk beside you, to celebrate your successes and support you through challenges. If she can't be that support, you need to ask yourself if she's someone with whom you can truly build a future. Take a moment to think, what would life be like with someone who fuels your dreams instead of extinguishing them? Someone who, even if they don't share your passions, can sincerely say, I know how much this means to you and I'm here to support you. That's the difference between a relationship that builds you up and one that tears you down. And speaking of relationships that tear you down, there's something even more destructive when she makes you feel like you're not enough. This message may be subtle, but its impact is profound. If you don't recognize it, it can deeply affect your sense of self-worth. Let's explore that in the next section. If this video is helping you recognize signs you've overlooked before, I invite you to subscribe and hit the like button to support this content. Stay with me until the end, because the most important lessons on protecting your emotional peace and building healthier relationships are still ahead. If you're committed to your personal growth, the final reflection I'll share could be a turning point in how you value yourself and make decisions for your well-being. Let me know. Where are you listening from? I'd love to hear from you. Let's keep going. Number 4, if she says you're not enough. Out of all the things someone can say to you in a relationship, few are as devastating as this. You're not enough. Sometimes it's said outright, other times it's disguised in subtle comments that seem harmless but leave deep scars. Those remarks that suggest you're falling short, that you're never doing enough, or that you can't meet their expectations are a direct attack on your very essence. A healthy relationship should be a place where you feel valued for who you are, not where you constantly have to prove your worth. When someone makes you feel like you're not enough, the issue isn't you. It's in how that person perceives and communicates their own insecurities. Often, people who make such comments are projecting their dissatisfaction and fears through criticism and devaluation. I remember one of this channel's listeners, Richard, who wrote to share his story. He had been in a 2-year relationship that seemed perfect at first, but over time, his partner started making him feel like nothing he did was good enough. If he cooked something special, she'd say, "It could have been better." If he planned a date, she'd point out it wasn't the right place. And if he shared his goals, she'd respond dismissively, implying they weren't worth much. Richard began second-guessing himself constantly. He thought that if he just did more, changed, or met her expectations, things would get better. But they didn't. With every effort, her list of demands grew longer, and the emptiness inside him deepened. "I felt like I was losing myself just trying to please her," he wrote in his message. Eventually, after a lot of reflection, Richard came to an essential realization. No matter how hard you try, you'll never be enough for someone who isn't whole within themselves. That truth was painful, but it set him free. He decided to leave the relationship. While the process wasn't easy today, he says he's regained his confidence and his peace. Richard's story isn't unique. Many people find themselves stuck in relationships where the constant message is that they're not good enough. But hear me out. You're not here to fulfill someone else's impossible expectations. Your worth doesn't depend on anyone's approval. As Viktor Frankl once said, man does not need to live to satisfy others, but to find meaning in his own life. If someone makes you feel like you're not enough, the most important question to ask yourself is, do I want to spend my life trying to prove my worth to someone who refuses to see it? A relationship should be a space where both partners can grow, not a battlefield where you're constantly measured and found lacking. And speaking of dynamics that drain your peace, there's another red flag that might seem harmless at first, but reveals a lot about the kind of relationship you can expect. Let's talk about what it means when someone constantly badmouths their exes, and why this can be a warning sign you shouldn't ignore. Number 5, if she always speaks badly about her exes. We all have a past, and that includes relationships that didn't work out. But there's a big difference between sharing an experience honestly and turning every memory into a constant attack on those who were once part of your life. If she always speaks badly about her exes, with resentment, harsh criticism, or mockery, It's a red flag you shouldn't ignore. When someone follows this pattern, they're not just showing you how they feel about those who came before you, they're also revealing something critical about their ability to take responsibility and learn from their experiences. Constantly criticizing exes can be a defense mechanism to avoid looking inward and acknowledging their role in the conflicts. But ultimately, it's a way of clinging to the past instead of moving forward. If you're with someone like this, it's not hard to imagine what could happen if the relationship doesn't work out. That same person who criticizes others today might talk about you the same way tomorrow. Beyond that, this attitude creates a negative environment that inevitably affects your emotional connection. Because if she can't let go of the past, how can she be fully present with you? This doesn't mean a person can't have had bad experiences or difficult relationships. What truly matters is how they choose to remember them. Someone who speaks with respect, even about challenging times, demonstrates maturity and a willingness to grow. But someone who constantly tears others down is stuck in a cycle that will eventually catch up with you too. Ask yourself, do you want to share your life with someone who carries that weight from the past? With someone who uses resentment as a way to cope with what they can no longer change? The truth is, to build a healthy and meaningful relationship, you need someone who can look back with peace and forward with hope. As Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. If she hasn't done the inner work necessary to close those chapters of her life, it will be hard for her to build something new and meaningful with you. In the end, the question isn't what she thinks of her exes, but what she's showing you about her ability to grow, let go, and start fresh. Take a moment to reflect. How do you talk about your own past? Are you able to find lessons even in difficult experiences? Can the person you're with do the same, or is she stuck in a cycle of blame? Because, my friend, what someone says about others reveals more about themselves than the people they're criticizing. The key is to listen carefully and decide if that's the kind of energy you want in your life. What we've explored today isn't just a list of phrases or behaviors. It's an invitation to prioritize your emotional well-being and choose relationships that help you grow. This isn't about judging or criticizing, it's about becoming aware of the energy you're allowing into your life. The words someone uses and the attitudes they display reflect their inner world, and by paying attention, you can learn whether that person is adding to or taking away from your journey. Each of these signs is an opportunity to reflect on what you deserve, because you're not here to settle for less or to spend your time and energy trying to fit into a relationship that doesn't respect or value you. Your peace, joy, and dignity should always be your priority, and if something doesn't support those, it's better to let it go. I want you to remember this whenever you face a similar situation. You don't need to change to fit into someone else's life. You need to stay true to yourself and surround yourself with people who recognize and appreciate your worth. As Marcus Aurelius said, the happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts, and that includes the relationships you choose to keep. My name is Celia, and this space is for us to reflect together, to give you practical tools to make wiser decisions and build relationships that truly matter. Here, we speak from the heart and with honesty, because I firmly believe that clarity and authenticity are the keys to a more fulfilling life. If this is your first time on the channel, I invite you to subscribe and turn on notifications. What's coming is full of lessons that can transform how you live and relate to others. If you've made it this far, thank you for taking this time for yourself. Let me know in the comments, have you experienced any of these signs? What did you learn from that experience? I'd love to hear from you. Before we wrap up, I encourage you to share this video with someone who might need to hear these words. Sometimes, a small piece of advice can spark a life-changing transformation. Here's more content that will inspire you. I'll see you in the next video.